welcome to our event, Hungry and Homeless in Isla Vista. I am Greg Johnson. I'm the director of the Walter H. Capps Center for the Study of Ethics, Religion, and Public Life here at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And it's my great honor to be welcoming you all to this event, welcoming our guests who will be introduced momentarily, and to thank our donors, our audience, for you all for coming and joining us. And let me just say that this event is really important to the mission of the center in the sense that we at the center really wish to be engaging local issues of great import, of necessity at the campus level, in the Santa Barbara community and beyond. And it's so wonderful that the Associate Director, Maeve DeVoy, and our long-term instructor, Gregory Jarrett, have taken the lead on this particular project, Hungry and Homeless in Isla Vista, to flag an important issue and to lift it up for us and create an opportunity for us to engage and to give back. More on that in a bit. This is part of our ethics and public policy forum at the center. We do this 3 times a year, so please stay tuned for further iterations of this project. I also want to thank our student workers, Alma Mendoza and Madden Westland, for their great work in helping this event come to be. At this juncture, I want to acknowledge that the University of California, Santa Barbara sits on Chumash lands and waters, unceded lands and waters, that this is a vital community around us to this day. And the institution simply needs to do better in honoring that connection, these people. And the center is doing its part to raise awareness along these lines, and we look forward to engaging Chumash relatives as able. With that, I'd like to welcome Gregory Jarrett to carry us forward into the evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. My name is Greg Jarrett. I represent the Walter H. Capps Center. I came here 10 years ago. I was teaching at Cal State LA and at East LA College. And I thought, wow, things will be really different. Now I can assign textbooks that cost $400, which I did. And it took me about 5 years to realize how significant the problems are. And you'll hear about them from our panelists. So tonight's event is meant to raise awareness about a host of issues, but we're also experimenting for the first time with a fundraising component. And I'll try to keep this from being a NPR pledge drive or something like that. But you'll be seeing donation links to CALPIRG, to Santa Barbara Street Medicine, to UCSB Basic Needs Fund, to the Associate Students Food Bank, and the super interesting EcoVista community that you'll hear a little bit about today, I hope. And by the way, if you know somebody who could benefit from tonight's event, reruns are available on our Facebook page. That's the Walter H. Capps Center Facebook page. Maybe we'll drop a link in the chat section to help you find out. So tonight should be a fast-paced panel discussion. We're asking panelists to speak for about 12 minutes, so it's going to move pretty quickly, I think, followed by a questions and answer period. Tonight's lineup includes County Supervisor Das Williams, Cristina Gomez from CalPIRG UCSB, Rebecca Segundo from UCSB Rapid Rehousing Unit, and Katie Murray from the EcoVista community. There is a questions and answers module at the bottom of your Zoom. Please keep questions. We invite you to ask questions. Please keep them short. And if you want to address them to a particular person like Cristina Gomez or whoever, put that right at the top to help us identify with that. Okay, so now to our panelists. Let's kick things off with Das Williams. Das, are you here? Let's see. Well, I'll start in. So, as you probably know, Doss Williams is the supervisor of the first district of Santa Barbara County, and he's the former representative to the California State Assembly, 32nd District. Prior to that, Williams served 7 years on the Santa Barbara City Council. He grew up in Isla Vista and has a master's degree from UCSB's Bren School of Environmental Science. Doss, are you there?
I am, and if I freeze up again, I'll just try to use my phone.
So welcome to Doss Williams. It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, because I think this is not only a intractable and difficult issue from a public policy standpoint, it's a deeply personal and humanitarian issue, and it is one that raises deep ethical questions that I think is right up the alley of both academic and the study of ethics. The typical email that I get about homelessness usually is, I want there to be solutions. This is from, a various amount of senders, but this place that you're proposing is not the right place because of it's too close to a children's center, or it's too close to residences, or it's too close to businesses. And so it's very interesting in that it's a solution, it's an issue that everybody wants solutions for, but usually whatever solutions are proposed are not acceptable to the people who are nearby those solutions. And it has made the issue intractable, difficult for government to accomplish even when there is funding. But I would say that this is the one time where we have more momentum, more things happening to address homelessness. When I was 16, the only way that I could go to City College and make ends meet was to be living out of my vehicle for 6 months out of the year during my time at SBCC. And that is a lot more common than anybody realizes. A lot more students, a lot more people that are employed, a lot more people are trying to hang on to the edges of normal life while living in their vehicle. And so the stats I'm about to show you will show how that is also growing. So maybe you could put up the slides, and I'll give you a little bit of the numbers. So in the last couple of years, the county, and you can go to next slide, has increased dramatically the number of beds with homelessness, but you haven't noticed because the number of people that need housing has gone up dramatically. Go to next slide. You can see that both the number of chronic homelessness and the number of people living in vehicles has been going up. And we expect the most recent numbers that include the year of COVID to even be more dramatic. And though it's also created solutions. COVID has, by nature of the crisis, created solutions. If you'd asked me just a year ago how long it would have taken to create a new homeless shelter in Santa Barbara County, I would have said 8 to 10 years. And in the last year, we opened go right now, looking for places for both temporary housing and for permanent supportive housing. Many of the folks who are here will be familiar. You can go to next slide. They'll be familiar with the pallet housing here in Isla Vista. And that frankly wouldn't have happened without the support of local elected officials, especially my colleague, Joan Hartman. We are building and looking for other opportunities, including looking for permanent buildings in Santa Barbara, Isla Vista, or Goleta, whether they be a former hotel or a current apartment, to be able to do more permanent supportive housing. We've also learned from the pallet housing model. We are planning on looking at doing something like that in North County, and we are going to soon do one in the city of Santa Barbara. You'll see that in the press soon. But we are expanding the model of permanent supportive housing combined with temporary housing. You've probably seen in the news that we are trying to acquire the youth hostel down by the waterfront for this purpose. And again, there will also be not a pallet housing project, because we found a model that is a little bit better aesthetically and from space-wise purposes for the residents, that will be unveiling in downtown. Shelter, which is a sort of non-congregate spur of shelter where we rent hotel rooms for the purpose of housing people in a temporary capacity. 60% of those folks have been able to be connected with permanent housing and services. We also, of course, combine that, since the county is also the behavioral wellness provider, meaning the mental health provider, the substance abuse provider for indigent folks in our community. So we've been able to pair that with the necessary services that folks need. And this is just the beginning. As many of you may have seen in the news, the governor plans to expand Project Roomkey and is proposing a dramatic expansion of it, a $7 billion expansion of it. We are poised to take advantage of that since we have many properties right now that we are bidding on as we speak, in expectation, in hope of funding. And it looks like at least the governor is proposing the funding that would help us take care of that. I think the most important thing from both an organizing and political perspective and an ethical one is, how do we get the residents of people in these communities to realize that it is in their long-term interest to locate facilities in an especially if we want to maximize the therapeutic potential of combining services with housing and minimize the potential nuisance effect of having a large centralized facility instead of a number of our internet wasn't too glitchy, and I'll try to answer any questions both through the chat.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. There is a bit of internet connection problem, but we hope to hear more from you in the questions and answers period. So our next panelist is, Cristina Gomez. She's a first generation student. She's oh, sorry, Dus, you're still here. Did you want to sum up? We're having some internet glitches here.
I just switched devices for question and answer later on. Thank you. I hope that was intelligible despite the freezing up of the screen.
It was great. Thanks, Dr. Williams. Thank you very much. So our next panelist is Cristina Gomez. She is a first generation student. She's a senior in sociology and communication. Cristina is the chair of the CALPIRG students chapter at UCSB and the coordinator of their Basic Needs campaign, which provides resources to students facing food insecurity, as well as striving for a commitment to make UCSB a zero hunger campus. Cristina Gomez, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Greg. Thank you so much for inviting me. Hi, everyone. Although I can't see you, I am going to be sharing my screen to talk to you guys. But again, thank you guys so much for inviting me. Thank you to the CAP Center. I'm really glad to be here representing CALPIRG. We are a student-run, student-funded nonprofit org here. Just bear with me while this gets loaded. There we go. Okay. As Greg mentioned, again, my name is Cristina. I'm a fourth year student here at UCSB studying communication and sociology. I am the former chair of CALPIRG students. We just did our elections, so we just re-elected our board, but I was the chapter chair for this entire year, and I'm still the campaign coordinator for our Basic Needs campaign, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. But yeah, I'm gonna just spend some time now just talking about what we at CALPIRG do for food insecurity and also creating awareness for the issues through activism. So for those of you who haven't heard about us or the work that we do, CALPIRG Students was started 45 years ago by students at UC Berkeley because they wanted to solve problems and make the world a better place. And instead of sitting by and letting other people make the decisions that would affect their futures, students wanted to play an active role in local, statewide, and national debates around issues like climate change, public health, voter participation, and so many other issues. We work mainly to protect the environment, make college more affordable, and promote civic engagement. And we definitely know that students have the power to make real change, everything from the civil rights movements to protecting the environment now. Students are often at the forefront of these movements to build a better future for our country. We extend our reach to all the UC campuses and several other universities throughout the state of California. We also hire professional staff that work to amplify the power of student activism and provide students with training, professional support, and resources to make real change in our communities. And we've been able to be effective all of these years because we're funded by over 30,000 students across the state of California who support the issues that we advocate for. And while we are known for our environmental issues, we also work on service campaigns that are more so focused on the student demographic. And so now to talk about the Basic Needs campaign. So as I said, I've been running this campaign for the past 2 quarters. And it mainly works to address the lack of basic needs that some students face. We really combined 2 important issues for students, that being hunger and homelessness, along with affordable textbooks. But to tell you a little bit more about that, so with tuition and rent costs in our college communities only increasing, more and more students are struggling to meet their basic needs while earning their degree. And I think there's a huge misconception that most students have parents who can pay for all of their college expenses. And that ultimately contributes to an underappreciation of hunger on campuses. And it really shouldn't be a thing that students have to choose between affording course materials in order to do well in a course and basic needs like food and housing. Food insecurity, I'm sure as you all know, is linked to not only poor health, but also poor academic performance and mental health symptoms such as anxiety and depression. Meanwhile, we're literally throwing away the solutions to the problem of hunger. In the United States alone, 40% of all food is wasted. And college campuses contribute a lot to this waste, producing about 142 pounds of food waste per student. And the reality is we do have what we need to end hunger. If we just redirect resources that go unused to those who can use them, we can not only reduce waste, but also achieve zero hunger. And so the solution to hunger on campus is to get food to students who are food insecure. But in order to do that, we really need a commitment to achieve zero hunger on our campus. Additionally, as I mentioned before, we're also advocating for affordable course options, such as open textbooks that are free and open for students to use. I'm sure all the students on here can attest to just textbook prices continuing to skyrocket, and more students are bound to face food insecurity because they put all their money into course materials. So our goal really is just to make UCSB a zero hunger campus and also to get the UCs system-wide to start an open textbook program so that students have the resources that they need. And also, as an activist organization, the main reason why we're running this campaign in the first place is to highlight student voices and experiences in order to share them with faculty and administration. We also work to gain support through things like student petitions, days of actions, and events to create more visibility and awareness for student hunger. But before we just focus on the work that CALPIRG is doing, let's just take a quick step back and explain how urgent and prevalent student hunger really is. So first of all, what is food insecurity for those who are unsure? Food insecurity ranges from not having any food to not having enough food to not having nutritious food. So food insecurity affects people of all ages and backgrounds and really depends on whether or not the person has the resources to sustain their food needs. So people who experience food insecurity deal with a number of issues that are a result of that lack of resources. So some results include malnutrition and not having healthy foods like fruit and vegetables available. And as a result of that malnutrition, there are a number of health problems that come along with that, such as like an increased risk for heart disease, anemia, and disordered eating. And on top of the physical health issues, we see that like the financial strain and worrying about food that a lot of students face also leads to mental health issues such as anxiety and depression. And unfortunately, here in the US, as I mentioned before, we waste a lot of food. Although 40% of food that's wasted could be given to those in need rather than be thrown away. But looking more specifically at the student demographic, so college students all over the US face food insecurity at some point during their college careers. Back in 2016, we conducted a survey on food insecurity just to see how prevalent the issue was. And we found that 25% of students qualified at having very low food insecurity at community colleges. That same stat being 20% at four-year colleges and universities. We also found that food insecurity is much more prevalent among students of color, with 50% of food insecure students being Black or African American and 40% non-Hispanic white. And then overall, we also found that 56% of first generation students have also reported to be food insecure. So of course, this study was done in 2016 and the numbers are much higher now, but the trend still exists. And that's that food insecure students tend to be from low income backgrounds, first generation college students, and persons of color. Now I'm sure every single person here has heard the phrase that college students are broke. Everyone always says that college students don't have money, but what does that actually mean? Like, what is the reason behind that? Of course, the obvious answer is tuition increases. That's a huge chunk of what we have to pay, but there's also so many other variables that contributes to a student financial strain. As students, we have to buy overly expensive textbooks, rent an apartment with several other people, and oftentimes we have to skip meals just to make ends meet. Because our education is the most important to us, students inevitably experience food insecurity at great rates, which is really upsetting. And then just so you guys can hear some student voices, These are some student testimonies from some of my interns when I asked them about food insecurity and their opinions or experiences with it. So first one being education, food, and shelter are human rights, not human privileges. If we can't give to the least of people in society, we're failing as a society. I don't think any student should have to worry about the cost of food or if they're going to have shelter at the end of the day. The pandemic, of course, has placed many students within tougher financial strains. And I think the student population is often disregarded in terms of the pandemic and how students are struggling to meet their needs. And of course, like many students have known other friends or family members who couldn't afford food and would either depend on rationing, food stamps, government aid, and resources within the community. I know I can definitely relate to a lot of these comments. I also remember skipping meals when I was living on campus because the meal plan was way too expensive, but you had to get one when living in the dorms. So I do remember purchasing the cheapest option, but unfortunately that did not equate to 3 meals a day. And I know for a fact that I'm definitely not the only person who has faced this dilemma. I've heard throughout my 4 years being at UCSB, I've heard of so many students dealing with either food insecurity and or houselessness. I've heard of students who ration their food to only 1 vegetable per day. I've heard of students who went to club meetings and promotional events just because food was advertised for attendees. And also a recent study showed that there are over 1,000 houseless students within the community of Isla Vista alone. That is far way too big of a number. And really the big picture that I hope all of you take here from today is that food insecurity is not just faced by a few students or even 100, it's literally faced by thousands of students who make health-threatening sacrifices in order to obtain a higher education. And of course, overarchingly, this is not just something that happens at UCSB. This is happening at every single university all over the United States. So looking at all those problems, many of us have to wonder what's the solution. So these are some of the solutions that just we at CALPIRG are advocating for. So as mentioned before, we're calling on our chancellor to make a commitment to reallocate resources to students in need. We have the support of our student government, our AS student government, and have collected over 200 petitions from students within these past quarter alone. Now, all we have to do is just gather a little bit more support and also just make sure that underprivileged students are accounted for by administration. I do think that that commitment would go a long way in terms of putting students first and caring a lot about students' well-being. Secondly, of course, more resources for students. Luckily, my organization is not the only one working on food insecurity and providing food to students. The AS Food Bank, Ivy Food Not Bombs, and several other orgs have noticed the urgency of basic needs, but there could always be more outlets to get more food to food insecure students. And of course, in terms of housing, there should definitely be more affordable housing to students in UCSB and within the community of Isla Vista as well. And then third, I do greatly believe that there is a stigma attached to being food insecure and or houseless that inevitably prevents students who face these issues when they get the help they need. Overarchingly, we need to make these resources more readily available so that students can get what they want whenever they want without feeling any shame. And of course, while these 3 little bullet points is not an exhaustive list, I do believe that by taking these actions, a zero hunger future is attainable, at least on our campus and the resources that we have here. But I do think that if we prioritize basic needs at our campus, I'm sure other campuses will soon follow suit and less students will have to struggle and will focus on their college education instead, which is the whole reason why we're here in the first place. So with all of that being said, if you're on this call right now and you are a student, and if you haven't done so already, we're going to drop a link to a petition to make UCSB a zero hunger campus. So please show your support as a student. We would love to include as many student voices as possible. And then if you would like to support our organization, there's also a link to donate, which I think Alma posted a little bit earlier. But once again, I super appreciate being here. Thank you so much for listening to the work that we do. And I truly look forward to all your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cristina Gomez. Very good. We'll get back to you in the question and answer period. Very good. So our third panelist is Rebecca Segundo. She works for the UCSB Financial Crisis Response Team. She supports the basic needs and rapid rehousing programs campus-wide, including transitional housing housing vouchers, and many related matters. So she's our main go-to person on the actual housing issue, or at least rehousing issues. Rebecca Segundo, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. Thank you for having me. Really glad to be in this space with you all and just kind of talk about this really important issue. I don't have any slides today, but I wanted to maybe start us off with discussing a few more recent surveys and studies that have been conducted across higher education to really look at food and housing insecurity, to really look at this issue and kind of what we found from that. So, well, we do know from the Hope Center study that this is an issue nationwide, that folks, are struggling with food and housing insecurity in higher education. The California Student Aid Commission, who administers the Cal Grant program, in 2019 conducted their student expenses and resources survey. So they looked at over 15,000 students in the UC, CSU, and California Community College systems as a whole, to really trying to get a little bit deeper at this issue. So what they did find from that report is older students and students with dependents face more challenges as it relates to affordability in higher education, and food insecurity is correlated with lower grades in college. In addition, the cost of attendance survey of 2019, which was conducted by the UC, looked at over 16,000 undergraduate students. That survey found a number of really important things, but one notable thing was that over 20% of UC students send money home to their families in need. With more and more transfer students coming to the UC, we also see a lot more non-traditional students arriving on campuses, who also have a lot of other additional expenses and who are older. In 2021, UCSB welcomed 2,453 transfer students, which was an increase from 2,114 the previous year. It's also pretty consistent with the California Student Aid Commission's report that found that over 70% of students who are experiencing homelessness in higher education were over the age of 22. So UCSB also became 43% first generation recently, meaning that over almost about half of the student body are the first in their families to be attending college. And as we know from some of the other speakers earlier today, this means that many students who are first gen and are low income are facing a lot of challenges as it relates to meeting their basic needs, such as food and housing insecurity. But I also really wanted to highlight that there is a connection between food and housing insecurity. One of the actually most recent studies that really gets at this issue a little bit deeper is the UC's most recent report titled Redefining Basic Needs in Higher Education. This actually just came out in August of 2020. I highly encourage folks to take a look at that. And I am going to pull out a couple of things from that study in just a second here, but one of the things that study found was that housing is really a priority over food. With limited resources, and when an emergency comes up, there's definitely going to be some expenses that take priority over others. This study found that housing expenses will typically come first and foremost, meaning food security comes second, comes third, fourth. And for students who experience housing insecurity, especially as it relates to kitchen access, this impacts students' abilities to cook and prepare their own meals in their own kitchen. So we also know from this report that challenges surrounding housing insecurity are multifaceted, that there's usually a lot contributing to this, a lot going on. So what I would like to do next is maybe share my screen. See if I can pull this off. Yay. Hopefully everybody can see this. I'll try to make this a little bit bigger. This is actually an infographic straight from the report that I just noted. And I really think that this housing insecurity web captures a little bit more about the multifaceted level of housing insecurity. So what we can kind of see as a part of the infographic here is issues related to housing insecurity are more represented in light blue. Situations stemming from housing issues are presented in green. So those are the ones I would like maybe folks to take note of what are some of these kind of contributing factors that are leading to housing insecurity, maybe leading to overcrowding, this long commute. I have limited kitchen access now, and we can kind of see this more serious representation of housing insecurity at the bottom under homelessness. So again, this is a really powerful report that I highly recommend folks to check out and to kind of get a better sense of this issue and how both food and housing insecurity are very much linked. So just to kind of build a little bit of a framework there, I did also want to take most of my time today to talk a little bit about the programs and the resources that we have in place at UC Santa Barbara to help support students facing basic needs and security challenges, such as food and housing insecurity. The Financial Crisis Response Team, which was established in 2016, is a collaborative group of folks, and it's being administered out of the Office of Financial Aid and Scholarships. They're working together with folks across campus to support students who are experiencing a financial emergency, something that's maybe going to impact their ability to graduate, complete the term, complete their program. So this does include folks who are facing challenges such as I have a huge medical bill that I have to pay, and maybe that's now going to take away my ability to buy my textbooks. I lost my job and now I'm unable to pay my rent next month. I'm not sure what I'm going to do or where to start. My parents lost their job. I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to continue to support myself now. So we see a lot of very different circumstances and situations as a part of the Financial Crisis Response Team. What we're really lucky to have in place is the ability for folks to who are supporting those students in crisis to act fast and expedite the support as much as possible. So for example, for folks who are maybe experiencing houselessness, they are able to connect with the team, and as soon as possible, we'll try to support that student with a plan of action. So one of the programs that falls under the scope of the Financial Crisis Response Team is our Transitional Housing Program. This is a short-term housing arrangement program where we are able to place students in emergency housing within 24 to 48 hours. Students can be housed for a maximum of 25 days, but they're also provided with a meal plan and case management support throughout the duration of their stay. Very often, the crisis team will work with the community housing office folks to really get that student connected with additional resources once that 25-day period comes to a close, so that students can have a more sustainable housing situation at the end of the program. Additionally, the Financial Crisis Response Team also provides support in the form of a housing voucher. So these are housing grants essentially to support students' housing costs for rent. These are available to students who are both in off-campus housing situations and in on-campus housing arrangements as well. This resource has been able to support students who have faced a risk of eviction, a final eviction notice, unable to pay their upcoming rent bill, and similar circumstances. The team also does recognize that housing is connected to food, is connected to my other basic needs. So this team also provides support in the form of holistic basic needs grants to really support that student towards the full web of what their basic needs might encompass. Most recently, this is actually also the time of year that we're gearing up for our subsidized summer housing support program through a program called the Summer Housing Incentive. Students on the call might recognize that name of that program. This has been an amazing program, partnership with the Summer Sessions Office, the Office of Financial Aid, Housing, the Billing Office, list goes on. But for folks who are going to be enrolled in summer, doing at least 12 units, have financial need, they could qualify for up to $1,000 towards their housing costs and grant funding for summertime. For students who are living in off-campus, they can also receive a grant. Students can also apply for this benefit on the Summer Sessions website, which I can drop at the end of my time, just so folks know where they can learn more about that resource. Really trying to, with that resource, support students during a really transitional period. We recognize that summer folks might be moving to a different lease, moving to a different housing circumstance. The need to pay for housing, though, is there. So we want to make sure students are fully supported in that. To also peel it back a little bit more, I wanted to be sure to highlight our Food Security and Basic Needs Advising Center, which is located at the University Center on campus. This has been coined SNAC for folks who know. We have been open throughout the pandemic, providing support to students in need. There's a lot of things that students can do when they come into the SNAC to receive support and resources. Our basic needs advocates on site are trained to support students with their CalFresh application if they're pursuing that. For folks who aren't familiar with the CalFresh program, this is a federal benefit program that provides qualifying folks with up to $234 right now in benefits per month towards grocery purchasing power. So as you can imagine, this goes a long way towards food support for a month period. This is up from typically a maximum of $204 per month due to the pandemic circumstances. In addition, students can also receive more broad basic needs advising when they come into the SNAC with support from the advocates. So we're happy to make sure students are aware of the resources like the AS Food Bank, Miramar Food Pantry, food nutrition and basic skills workshops where they can learn more about how to cook and prepare their own meals. In addition, for folks who might have needs connected to technology, we recognize that technology, especially since the pandemic, has really highlighted this as a basic need. Support is key, and we want to make sure students not only have access to a working and functioning device, but also to consistent and reliable internet access. So there's a number of different types of support we might connect that student with. Who are looking for a more technology-based support. There is a Google form on the Basic Needs website, which is called food.ucsb.edu, for folks who might want to request a technology-related need, and then we can get that student linked up with those resources as soon as possible. Also, just to flag, we recognize not everyone is comfortable coming to campus or in the area to come to campus who might need more basic needs support. So I highly suggest that students go to the food.ucsb.edu website. Again, this is our basic needs website where you can actually live chat with the basic needs advocate. There's a little avocado that appears in the bottom right-hand corner when you first visit the landing page. And this is where you can actually engage and live chat with an advocate. We're actually live chat hours are a little bit even longer than our in-person hours at the SNAC. So it's a great resource if you're just trying to get some more information about where to start and what resources you might be eligible for. So really did want to highlight those. But I also did want to kind of pause here and just kind of looking ahead, from where we are now. I definitely think there's more work certainly to be done to address this issue. I think for one thing, we've already discussed this a bit this evening, but normalizing accessing basic needs resources is going to be a big one through our campus programs, especially some things that we have done to kind of bring more awareness to the resources, more visibility to the resources. We partnered with the Office of Financial Aid and incorporated CalFresh information into financial aid award letters so that when those students might be looking at their award letter, they can get that information right there, how to apply, what the benefit is. In addition, we do additional outreach to students who are eligible for work study so that they know about the CalFresh benefit as well. Something else we've also done pre-pandemic that I really look forward to picking back up when we can go back to in-person safely is doing some more drop-in hours of our CalFresh and basic needs advocates throughout other campus departments, and making sure we reach students wherever they might be. Another big one that I'll maybe close out my time with is just helping spread the word about the programs that are available. It is often that I connect with students and, oh, I didn't know that this was available, that this was still happening. So I think we always could use help in spreading the word about the resources that are available. For example, even right now, our Rapid Rehousing communications team members have recently relaunched a social media campaign focused on how we live. And it's really focused on highlighting housing insecurity in higher education, kind of looking more at some of the stigma that is surrounding the issue, and making sure folks know about some of the resources that are in place. So with that, I'll pause there and pass it back to Greg. I really appreciate the time to speak with y'all this evening, and looking forward to questions later on. So thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. We really appreciate your contributions, as with all the panelists. We'll get back to you in the question and answer period. Okay, so our final panelist is Katie Murray, who represents EcoVista and is a member of the EcoVista Coordinated Action Team. Katie is a parent, a 7th generation member of our Santa Barbara community, and a queer two-spirit member of the Akamelo Owadamam Nation. Katie Murray, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Gregory. I'm really happy to be here tonight. As you can imagine, this is an issue that's really near and dear to my heart. I wasn't really expecting to share this tonight, but I was inspired by some of the things I was hearing Doss say. I also have experienced housing insecurity during college. I ended up living in a tent for a bit at one of the co-ops when I went to UC Santa Cruz. So this issue just really means so much to me. Housing and food insecurity are some of the biggest issues that adolescents face. And as Greg mentioned, I'm a member of EcoVista. EcoVista is a lot of things. It's a student club right now. Sometimes it's a class that's taught by John Foran, where students can work on projects. And it's also a community organization. Its main goal is to make Isla Vista into an eco-village. So what is an eco-village, you ask? It's a community that's fully integrated with nature. It's one that supports and tends the land. So some of the things that we're working on right now with EcoVista is we have a climate justice press where we have published fiction and poetry and people are welcome to submit to. We have a zine called The Radical. We have a series of garden plots, and our biggest project to date is the food forest. Now, you can learn more about us on our website and Instagram, which I believe have been put in the chat. So food has long been a really popular issue with EcoVista. We currently have several garden plots, like I mentioned, at the UCSB Greenhouse Garden Project, which is a community garden at UCSB. And if you haven't been there, I really highly recommend it. I think it's one of the hidden gems on campus. People don't seem to know about it very much when I bring it up. There's tons of apple trees there and flowers in the spring, and there's also that, so it's a really good place to just relax. The garden plots there have enabled us to teach our members about gardening and vegetables and herbs, as well about edible weeds that have sprung up voluntarily in our plots, such as nettle. Which is a delicious plant. You could make a tea out of it. I enjoy it as a soup base, and it helps with type 2 diabetes by actually lowering blood sugar. As I mentioned, our food forest we're really proud of. Now, what is a food forest, you might ask? So food forests are designed to mimic natural systems that are found in nature, they're a garden. And just as a forest has a canopy and has an understory with shrubs beneath that, and then a ground cover, so does our food forest. This helps the forest be planted more densely than would otherwise be The garden is designed so that the plants work together rather than against each other. And we in turn work with nature rather than against it. We hope that designing a garden with more than how it looks in mind can help people connect with the parks in a totally different way. For example, many are the times that I've gone to the park with my daughter only to have her snack fall in the dirt. I'm sure all of you parents out there can relate. So that was a great immersion lesson on composting, but not quite the best use of a snack. So I dream of a park where parents can freely pick snacks from the trees for their children. It is shown that children who grow their own food eat a lot more produce. As my teacher once told me when I worked in early childhood education, children who don't know a place can't protect it. Now, I want this community of Isla Vista to feel like a place that that's a home for people that live there. And I believe that starts with eating a blueberry off a blueberry bush. To fight for a place starts with that place feeling like one that where a person can laugh and play and dream in, to dream of something better, more whole. That's what EcoVista is. And that's what led Tony to show up with his friends at the Isla Vista Recreation and Park District meeting and ask for a food forest in the park. And that's what led Ash Valenti, one of our own EcoVistans, to run for the Isla Vista Recreation and Park District seat, and which they won a year later and vote the food forest into being. Speaking of the Parks Board, I'm happy to report that we have 2 EcoVistans on it currently, and I've applied for the open position. EcoVista has often been described to me by its members as a place where I dream while I'm awake. I dream that this lush garden is just the first of many other sites to come. And if you would like to support that dream becoming a reality, I invite you to please join us in whatever way makes sense to you. So, of course, though, in a place like Isla Vista, we're not the only ones doing this kind of work. There are many more groups that you can become involved with. In true Isla Vista fashion, some of these are established and some are just starting out. So a few I'd like to mention are Food Not Bombs, which has been mentioned briefly, the Galita Food Collective, and Backyard Box 805. So Food Not Bombs serves free food to the community currently Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5:30 in the center of Isla Vista. The location has changed with the pandemic, so feel free to check out their Instagram to see where the current location is for serving. The Galita Food Collective is a group that we're currently collaborating with. They provide food boxes to about 20 families a week. They do a lot of gleaning in Isla Vista, and they're working right now on a community fridge project that would allow people to leave produce or take produce at any time. And this fridge is going to be in front of Manly Co-op. We're really excited to have EcoVistans working on a mural right now for the side of the community fridge. So it looks beautiful for the community. And the last group that I wanted to mention is Backyard Box 805. And they're currently gleaning a lot in Isla Vista and redistributing the food to other people. So of course, as people mentioned, housing though is really the much harder issue to work up. It's the #1 economic reason that Isla Vista is so hard to live in. And it's really acute for students, as it's been for decades now. So we're just starting to work on it systemically. We have a large working group that has just started to develop ideas for community planning. And we want to work with the IVCSD, UCSB, and the county in general on housing, including homelessness. Some of the ideas on our radar include affordable housing. So the usual approach to affordable housing has been to require developers to include some units that are supposedly affordable when they build a housing project that is otherwise unaffordable. In Isla Vista, there's very little land that could be developed, and there are very, very few new housing projects or developments, excuse me. In recent years, there's been expensive icon housing and commercial building. One innovative possibility might be to allow landlords of existing apartment buildings to add another story, which is being currently considered in Santa Barbara. But Isla Vista would have to do this with a much tighter set of controls than is likely the case in Santa Barbara. where developers have political as well as economic power and can influence new regulations with that power. So if the IVCSD and the county were to work with housing activists and other stakeholders, it might just be possible to add some really affordable apartments that would additionally be ecologically advanced in all respects, saving energy use, water and other resources, and using renewable energy as a source. Another solution that has been put forward by environmental and climate activists in Europe and the United States is the tiny house model. This creates new housing that is compact, up to date, and more affordable than any other housing on the real estate market. Tiny houses also require less land per unit built. And thus, where land is expensive, as in communities like Isla Vista, they could be a really interesting experiment to try. Tiny houses too would require progressive and visionary changes to zoning so that landlords with enough yards or underdeveloped property might consider leasing the space to new homeowners or develop the properties themselves and rent them out. Expanding cooperatives in Isla Vista is another idea we'd like to explore. Cooperatives are well proven to allow ownership and participation in decision-making to folks who have never had this opportunity. Isla Vista's proudest institution might well be the food co-op, which has lasted for decades and is owned by its members. There's also a long tradition of housing co-ops in Isla Vista, and there's currently a network of half a dozen housing co-ops such as Manly, Bico, Dolores, and Newman, which all provide perhaps 100 spaces for students to live at a much lower rate than the private sector, and also lower food costs because food is bought in bulk and cooked together. Many more students board at the co-op, which means they share meals with the residents, saving money on food and becoming part of the community. In a typical academic year, though not this past one, there's usually a long waiting list of folks that seem really eager to get one of the coveted spots. What Isla Vista urgently needs is a much larger set of housing cooperatives, including ones that are open to non-students. Could a coalition of residents, activists, and community organizations come together to work on this, all supported by the Isla Vista CSD and perhaps with funding from UCSB? This is the conversation that we'd really like to be part of. Given that saddled with substandard, crowded, and overpriced private apartment buildings, every effort should be taken to preserve and extend the rights of renters in Isla Vista. The Isla Vista Tenants Union has long fulfilled this need with its services and advice. In the future, we could envision a true union of the tenants in Isla Vista to bargain with landlords in the same collective way that labor unions do, turning the captive nature of the market for renters into one where they have more power, who, after all, need students to accept the housing that they offer on unequal terms. Similarly, individual building occupants could form informal and invisible guerrilla unions and co-ops to make their needs heard and demands met. Another idea that's crossed our mind lately, considering everything is going on, is a campground. We're currently exploring the pros and cons of having one in an IV where residents could stay longer than is usual in campgrounds across California. Such an idea could upgrade the housing of those currently houseless or living in their vehicles and bring in revenues to the community and the CSD and IVRPD that could be put to good use. And this leads to the final idea that I'd like to offer. The right to live in campers, yurts, vans, and cars to alleviate the housing and economic crisis for students and residents of Isla Vista. One legal reform that would be a game changer in Isla Vista would be to regularize and support the dozens of students and residents who live in their own vehicles right now. They save enough money by not paying rent to meet other needs, yet they exist in a precarious status with respect to the police, local government, and wealthier residents. If their self-housing were recognized as necessary and just by these parties, and if needed services like restrooms and utilities were made publicly available to them, this would go a long way to alleviating hardship on the streets of Isla Vista and giving the community a good reputation for how it handles the housing crisis. Indeed, if all of these options were embraced and others encouraged from the bottom up, the town of Isla Vista could serve as a model for other communities across California and the United States to undertake similar efforts to solving the #1 economic barrier to survival in the United States. So we're ready to explore these options and work on others with anyone who wants to do this work. And we will try to create a space for this to happen in the coming months. Thank you so much for having me speak today. I really appreciate the opportunity. And thank you so much to all the other speakers who were so wonderful. I look forward to hearing any questions that people may have.
Thank you very much, Katie. We really appreciate your contributions. We have a number of questions, especially there's a lot of questions for Das Williams, but I want to make sure that all the panelists get an equal share of questions. Das, are you there? Yeah, let's see. Well, Das Williams might be resetting up his computer equipment, so we'll come back to him. Cristina Gomez. Yeah, I think a lot of us are very alive to the food waste issue. I mean, it's just absolutely tremendous. I think Anna Lepay said that in terms of climate change, you know, if food waste was made an independent nation, it would be like the 5th largest emitter in the world, or something like that. But locally, acting locally, Cristina, how do we actually do it? How do we actually redistribute food? I mean, yeah, sure, campus is going to have a lot of food waste, and it's always easy to say, but how do we actually do that?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question to address. I mean, I remember from being a student and being on campus, you know, you have to go to the dining commons. The dining commons in itself is an example that I always like to bring up, because I remember as a student going with my little tray to go put the food back and just seeing how much food was wasted and will inevitably, you know, some of it composted, of course, but so much food that could be going to other students. And I've had a couple friends who have worked in the dining commons, and just them telling stories of like all the food that they had to throw away at the end of the day. And I think that's, you know, a question for administration to address. Rebecca, I know you're doing a lot with basic needs at UCSB. And I think it would, like, some sort of implementation of having that food go to students who need it at the end of the day, or students who maybe not have a meal plan or something like that, can have that food as opposed to throwing it away. Because although composting and like recycling and all that stuff is really great, like I would rather have a student be fed than, you know, composting happening. So I do think that's probably one of the biggest contributions to food waste, is definitely how our dining commons are set up. And we have 4 of them. So that's literally so much food that goes to waste at the end of every single day. And I really hope that, you know, our UCSB's administration does something about that. I think that's probably something I would really like to see as a student, and I know other students would like to see that as well.
Wow, great, thank you. Thank you. Okay, Das Williams, we have a number of questions for you, but I guess I'll pitch 2 at you. One member of the audience is wondering about the prospects of pallet housing for, first of all, for Carpinteria, and whether that would extend, and Katie was talking about tiny houses in IV, would that reasonably extend to IV?
We're looking for parking lots anywhere in the county. Obviously, we want to have buy-in from whatever city's jurisdiction we're proposing to fund a project on. So the city of Carpinteria is their own jurisdiction that controls their own land uses. So the city council, we would actually have to get permission from them. But the county, we're willing to fund a project anywhere in the county where somebody steps up and is willing to lease us a parking lot. And you know, the project that I mentioned earlier, that would be the next temporary housing project in the county, is located in the city of Santa Barbara. We have buy-in from the city. It's in my district, so I'm very willing to do projects in my district too. And I think it will be really show the community and the world that this can be done. And it's planned to be a larger
Okay, we're hoping that Das Williams gets his connection back.
Maybe he could finish the question in the chat.
Okay. Oh, here he is. We missed the end of your answer, Das.
just it's going to be a 2-year-long project, and we're hoping to have more sites after that. We won't stop it. If we can find another parking spot in the city of Santa Barbara, we'll do more than one project in a given jurisdiction. But thus far, the support from the mayor and the city council in the city of Santa Barbara has been a lot higher than in other jurisdictions. But we're willing to do it wherever we can get buy-in from the council.
Okay, great. Thank you, Das Williams. I have more questions for you, but let me spread it around to other panelists. Rebecca, so in my experience as a professor, it's a very happy time for first generation students. I mean, I'm very pleased that I write letters of recommendation for law school and graduate admissions and whatnot. And again and again, I'm saying that we're very proud of these first generation students. So it seems really great. At the same time, I'm wondering, many first generation students are coming in as transfer students, as you noted. I'm wondering how much this is really enhancing the problem. While there's considerable success, it seems that a lot of people are, I should say, more people are coming in, more students are coming in without, funding, as you know. And to what extent do you think this is, just an information problem, that students just don't know the resources that are there? Or to what extent do you think that they just don't have the resources to go to such an expensive university?
Thanks, Greg. That's a great question. I think, again, this is a multi, a faceted issue, and to just say it's just based on student populations, just based off of information. I think it's all those things coming together. To your point of kind of just our changing student population, we're seeing more first gen students, more transfer students, more non-traditional students come to campus. And even as Cristina noted in some of her slides, this is also something that far more impacts students of color. So as we are seeing kind of this also change in student population of what we have coming into UC, the resources need to be there to support students through their program. I do think information is a bit of it as well. We have a number of amazing basic needs advocates who work as a part of our communications efforts to reach students on a lot of social media since the pandemic began, but also to really reach students in different spaces. One thing for any professors on the call who might be interested in incorporating basic needs resources on your syllabi, would be happy to either send you a slide deck or some text for your syllabi. A lot of students will look at your syllabi. So just to further expand that effort as well. We're trying to do workshops, appointments with students via Zoom with whatever method that we can get the word out. We're trying to reach students wherever they might be and serve them also wherever they might be, knowing that even in the pandemic, that they may not be in the immediate area, and we want to make sure that they know about resources wherever they might be as well. Didn't get to speak too much about that during the slide deck, but you know, since the pandemic, we've been able to really link up even stronger with our UC colleagues across the state who are providing more comprehensive basic needs support all over. And I think that that's been a very powerful tool to have during this time to make sure folks can have their basic needs resources available wherever they are. So I'll pause there.
Right. Actually, that was the other question that I was going to have for you and Cristina. And we can put this in the back and you can think about it. But I mean, one of my questions was going to be, you know, as faculty, sometimes I wonder, you know, what can I do other than, you know, donate or you know, that kind of stuff, of course I can do. And of course, putting something on the syllabus is one answer. But we might come back to this question. I think that's tremendously important. Katie, I got to be honest, I was hoping to ask you questions about, you know, the future, or, you know, and how Isla Vista can improve and become more self-sufficient and learn more about food forests. And, you know, this is the kind of question I wanted to ask, and I still do. But then at the end, when you bring up issues of, you know, the legal support and problems of with police and whatnot, unfortunately, I don't want to ask this question, but can you tell us more about that? You know, what is actually going on in the ground, what people are experiencing in this sort of thing?
I'm trying to think how to answer that. I think it's difficult to answer some of these questions because it really does affect people's day-to-day life. And people are in a really precarious position. But yeah, I would say there are a sizable amount of students that are currently living in their vehicles from my own personal experience. And that from talking to them, the kinds of information that I've been getting is that there's been a reprieve for a while with COVID as far as some enforcement issues, but lately that has changed, and I would definitely like to see some of the laws changed around that to make it easier for people to live in their vehicles, because this is a very expensive place. And from talking to many people, you know, living here as long as I have, there's been a great number of my friends who have moved out because of the expense. In fact, I often feel like I'm the last one standing, to be honest. So it's a very expensive place, and I think people love it and they're willing to do many different things in order to stay, you know. And college is it means so much to people for so many reasons.
Yes.
Yeah, and I could speak more to my personal experience from college, but I think I'll leave it there for now. You're welcome to ask me about that later.
Actually, I feel bad. I'd like to end on a sort of a bit of a happier note, even though this topic is not a, you know, tremendously happy one, but a bit of a more optimistic note with you. I'm really interested in these food forests, and I think probably your best answer would be come down and see it, right? And I think that's a pretty good idea for me to do. But what, you know, I understand the sort of ecology moves that you're making. Aren't skeptics are going to say, well, isn't this going to be a tragedy of the commons, that people will just go there and, you know, whatever, take all the fruit or something like that? Do you have problems like that? Or how do you see, you know, these food forests and related things, you know, working into a overall integrated future?
Well, honestly, Gregory, the staff have been, or people have been telling me that the staff have been worried that there'll be too much fruit on the ground. They're a little more concerned about that. But I think that there's a lot of other community groups that we'll be partnering with in the future if some of these different groups survive. Food Not Bombs has been going on for, oh gee, how long has it been now? It's got to at least be 12 years at this location in Isla Vista, and before that I think the Food Not Bombs group was going on downtown for at least probably like 8 years. So I know that I feel confident in saying that there will be some discussion around some of these issues, as is always when there are free resources, but there are a lot of groups that are stepping up to distribute more than I was even aware of until I actually started talking to people about this panel. So I'm feeling really heartened about that, about student passion, but also, you know, this is a real need for people, and people are going to be stepping up and trying to find creative solutions like they always do. And I look forward to working with them in whatever capacity that might be. Check.
Great, thank you. We really appreciate that. Das Williams, I have an email question. It's sort of outside of your jurisdiction, but you probably have an opinion about it. You're not in charge of student loans, but obviously student loans is one factor that's really contributing to this. And I could actually open this question up to anybody, any panelist who wants, you know, their take on student loans. But the question is about, you know, I don't know, what advice. I mean, right now, student loans are not open to bankruptcy, right? And so they're really a pretty serious problem. And I can imagine that a lot of students are just like seeing the debts go up and up and up, and maybe at a certain point it becomes rational, or appears to be rational, to, you know, sleep in your van, you know. And but the question is, you know, what should we do, or what would you recommend to Sacramento, or whatever the relevant body is, that we do about student loans?
My understanding is that President Biden is pursuing a student loan forgiveness effort. It looks like it does have some income requirements, meaning you can't make over a certain amount to qualify for the loan forgiveness. I think that's probably the best game in town that we have now to address the student loan issue. But I'll tell you, there's been some great research at UCSB on this, that the principal problem with college affordability has more to do with how much funding colleges have, which is a function somewhat of how much middle and upper class tax shelters there are in the education tax credit. That if you took away the education tax credit, you'd actually have a ton more money for public higher education, and you'd probably be able to make it not free, but closer and definitely more affordable for all.
Great, thank you very much. Does anybody else want to touch on that question of student loans and financing? Okay. Through all these questions, what do we have here? I have a question. This can go to anyone. I think was directed at Das Williams. This is from John Foran, about the percentage of, I mean, there's lots of numbers that you showed on your slides, Das Williams, about how many people in the county are unhoused or underhoused. What percentage of those apply to Isla Vista? Are we disproportionately high? Well, let me try a different question. Oh, okay. Let me ask a general question that I like, anybody or everybody to speak to. I mean, when we think of homelessness in this country, we think of the indigent, right? I mean, just the general population. We think of somebody sleeping under a freeway, and that's a terrible problem that we're dealing with. But that's not, that's not the standard case, right? I mean, even outside of the university, most people who are homeless have jobs, or at least part-time jobs. And most people who are homeless have cars, as we know. That's often where they sleep. Does anybody want to take up the question of conditions on the ground? We see people in cars, we see people in tents, but what other conditions, I mean, and this doesn't have to be homelessness under the rubric of, housing insecurity. What other forms does that take?
Well, I'd just say that the lack of production of rental housing in the state of California is a dramatic factor. That you have a rental level all along the coast of California.
Well, while we're waiting for Das, does anybody else want to take this up? I mean, if I'm uninformed, what other forms does housing insecurity manifest itself in perhaps ways that are less visible?
Yeah, Greg, I can speak to that a little bit. I would just echo some of the things that have already been said surrounding housing insecurity, and that it's far more broad than what we might initially think about. And we've seen this kind of manifest in a number of different ways through the financial crisis response team and serving students. It could look like overcrowding. It could look like, actually, I live in a converted unit that does not have flooring, heat. I don't have regular access to my kitchen or a bathroom. And it could also look like I'm living in my vehicle and I don't have any access to cook and prepare my own food. I think it also kind of goes back to just the interconnectedness between food and housing insecurity, and it's just usually not necessarily one of those things. But also, just to speak a little bit more broadly about basic needs security in general, that it is perhaps more broad, even in this most recent report that I've been plugging a lot this evening. Students are the student-informed newer definition of basic needs that's come out of this report does say, I need a place to shower, I need a place where I can have hygiene products, where I can cook and prepare my own food, and a number of other things. I really think technology, as we have most definitely seen since the pandemic began, has become a basic need now more than ever. So I think Cristina maybe had something else to say too, so I'll pass it to her.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, I was just going to reiterate some of the points that you just mentioned now. But Greg, I do appreciate you making your comment earlier where houselessness is often seen very negatively and seen only one certain way. And that's not the case. Rebecca, as you were saying earlier, it could look like overcrowding. I think in my experience as a college student, I've seen the most common form of houselessness that I've seen with my fellow peers is students who couch surf. And go from house to house without having a stable place where they could reside. and I think a lot of that goes back to, the high cost of college, not only tuition, but, rent costs here in IV. Even if you live in a house where it's like 12 other people, you're still paying, minimum $400, upwards of $800. And it's inaccessible for a lot of people. And I do think that, the idea of just providing shelter for someone goes beyond just a roof over their head. They have to have access to, a kitchen, a place where they can shower and bathe, and all of these other things that are basic needs that I think are ignored as basic needs.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else want to speak to this? Or that's a pretty good answer. Good answers. Okay, we have just a few minutes left. I don't know about closing statements. I'll ask a question. You can interpret it as broadly as you like, and let's hear from everyone. But was it Cristina or Rebecca who raised the question? Oh, in my mind, I'm wondering, what I can do. I can donate money. I can donate my time. Now, I'm speaking as faculty because I'm always wondering, what should I do? But we can interpret the question more broadly, that where should we be putting our resources? What can we do to address these issues? Is it about information? Is it about specific things we can do? Or if that question is too broad, I'll broaden it up even more. What that we haven't talked about is where should we be putting our energies? Let me just start with Das Williams, and we'll let everybody have a brief closing statement. Now, let's go the other direction. Let's start with Katie. You want to take this any way you want.
So
You waited for me?
Oh, Das is ready, I think.
Okay, Das.
I'll let him go first.
I done is oral consistency. People ask solution needs site. Solutions need know the solutions to homelessness, but they involve mob sites. And of those two, right now, the one to get is a place where the surrounding will accept housing 20 homeless individuals in their community can be made work. And so that kind of public discourse, I think, with people, profess age and social networks, precisely the social network of, Gen Xers and gamers are the strong voice. And the most important way to get sight and solution.
Okay, thank you, Das Williams. Briefly, we need to close up. So if you guys just want to have a closing comment, I asked what I can do, but you can just give any closing comment you would like. Cristina?
Yeah, sure. To quickly address your question, I think a lot of students sometimes don't feel seen by faculty because we're dealing with so many other classes and so many other external factors, things with our families or things that we're dealing with friends and all these other, sort of things that we're balancing all at once. So I think the main thing is just to be mindful of that as faculty and always be there for their students. Like if they ask for an extension or something like that, just to be mindful that it's not just, academic stuff that's on our mind. Oftentimes it's where's our next meal going to be? Where am I going to sleep tonight? And I hope, those students or the amount of students who deal with that definitely lessens. I do think that faculty can do their part in just being mindful of that and addressing any concerns that students have regarding any of those. And of course, putting the resources on syllabi is a really great option as well.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Katie, do you have any thoughts about this, or how would you like to close out?
Yeah, I was gonna say, Gregory, I mean, a couple things come to mind. First, I just want to echo what Rebecca was saying about putting the basic need information on the syllabus, right? These students are coming to college, and they're coming to a place where they don't necessarily know people, they don't have the network set up. So really having that trusted adult there to walk them through and help them get to the next step of, oh, where can I go to try and apply for food stamps? And I think some of the things I think Christina was saying just about normalizing that is such an important aspect to things. I've definitely helped other people to apply for food stamps and assistance in the past, and they thought, oh, I shouldn't do this because I have this or that, or it's not for me, it's not for me for this or that reason. But it's for everyone to try and apply, to see if they can get. I've definitely gone to the student food banks with friends who are using those resources, and it can be a bit disheartening to try and do some of these things if they've never been there. But having gone to the student food bank, I can say it's a great place where people are hanging out and they're having tea and they're having pieces of cake and they're talking, and it's very social. And so I think just kind of starting to have some of those conversations is a great place to start. But also as a professor, you have such an important position in our community, and so much training in speaking just in the public, talking to people about how to use their voice and make those public comments and really get to some of those spaces who are just learning about some of these things, who might be unsure about how the political process works. Is a really good step you can do, because what I'm hearing from people is that in 5 years we might be having affordable housing come down the pipeline, in terms of these buildings being built 4 and 5 stories tall downtown. But until then, this is still a really incredibly unaffordable place to live, and people are being actively pushed out. So anything you can do to lend support to policies that might be coming down the pipeline, with the very articulate manner that I know you have, would be really fantastic for all of the students to see as a model, but also to help guide them would be really fantastic, and we would appreciate your support.
Thank you very much. We're running out of time, but Rebecca, I want to give you a chance to chime in briefly. Give you the last say.
Sure. I'll be really quick, folks. I just want to say I'm really thankful for the time with you all, and just to kind of echo what it said. I think normalizing accessing these resources will be big, and then also just spreading the word about what is out there and what is available. There's so many different ways to do that. And if you're not quite sure, you can just go to the food.ucsb.edu website, chat with an advocate, and we'll get connected and make sure that we get the information out there. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone for contributing. I'm going to put up, can we put up our slide of the donation links to CALPIRG, to the Santa Barbara Street Medicine, to the UCSB Basic Needs Fund, to the Food Bank, and to the EcoVista community. We'll leave it up there a few minutes, but thank you all for participating, and thank everybody for tuning in and listening. And so I think we'll sign out on that one. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for letting me be part of this.
Sure.
Bye.